And I think also, too, a lot of people are becoming scared of normal blood sugar spikes, right? And it's completely normal to see some sort of a rise in blood sugar after consuming carbohydrates. It's a very normal physiological event that happens in our body. We eat carbohydrates, they're broken down into glucose. Glucose rises in our bloodstream, and that's why we have a pancreas to produce insulin to bring that down. So that normal rise is completely okay. It's when you start going above that normal target range, that's when it becomes more of an issue.
Welcome back to Body Signals. I'm Bill Tancer, your host, and I am so excited to have two special guests on our show today. We've got Diane Licalzi and Jose Tejero. They are both co-founders of the Reversing Type 2 Diabetes, a company that is helping people do exactly that. Now, Diana is a registered dietitian and a certified diabetes care and education specialist and holds her master's in nutrition science and policy. And Jose is an exercise physiologist with a degree in exercise science and a two-time Ironman triathlete. I got to give you props, Jose, for finishing the Ironman twice. I used to compete in triathlon, but only did Olympic distance.
Oh, I love it. That's why I have done it twice.
Yeah. I say compete. I was actually the last person to finish my last race. And coming in to the finish, I had a squad car behind me because they had closed the roads and I was the last person.
Hey, it's all about finishing.
Yeah, and then I round the corner on that run in through the chute and they're disassembling the finish line, but they left the clock up. And my team was on a bus cheering me from the bus because they wanted to go home.
Hey, but you finished. That's what matters at the end of the day.
Yeah. So the fact that you did two Ironmans, I mean, that's amazing.
Thank you.
You guys both have written a book, and I'm excited to have you guys on before the book actually comes out. I usually don't get the jump on this. And your book is called Reversing Type.
It's the Type 2 Diabetes Revolution.
The Type 2 Diabetes Revolution. Yeah, there we go. We got a great image of it. The Type 2 Diabetes Revolution. And it's a cookbook. It's a meal planning book. It's also an educational book about how if you have some metabolic dysfunction, you can actually reverse that by using diet to Diana's expertise and there's a little bit there about movement and exercise as well, which Jose is your expertise. I would love to ask you a question that I ask all authors, which is why did you decide to write this specific book?
Yeah, so the book kind of started, it was kind of part of our journey into why we decided to go into type 2 diabetes in the first place. So let me go back and I'll tell you a little bit about my journey into diabetes. I'm a registered dietitian, and I always kind of knew I wanted to focus specifically on type 2 diabetes because it runs in my family. So I've seen a lot of my family members struggle with type 2 diabetes. And after becoming a dietitian, I worked in different healthcare settings, one of them being outpatient. And I really thought the healthcare system did such a poor job educating or giving people with type 2 diabetes the proper education and care that they really needed and deserved. So, for example, in an outpatient clinic at a community hospital, I was only able to see my patients for 20 to 30 minutes at a time every 3 to 4 weeks. And when you're dealing with something like diabetes, which is a life threatening condition, it's really not enough time. It's not enough time to spend with them to try to tell them what they need to do, convince them why they need to do it, and get them to make habits, which is never an easy thing to do. And so I decided to kind of move out of the healthcare system, start my own private practice, and really turn to social media so I could reach more people as well. I felt like the one-on-one was really limiting. So I turned to social media and I started posting nutritional educational content on there. And that's how I actually met Jose. He was doing something very similar on Instagram as well. And we just we just clicked. Like everything kind of fell into place. We knew we wanted to work together. I brought the dietitian and nutrition side. He's an exercise physiologist. So it kind of all fit. And we had very similar philosophies when it came to reversing the root cause of type 2 diabetes and not just managing blood sugars, not just managing the symptoms of it. And so we created our program. We started there where so that we could really reach more people. We are an online program, and then to continue on that path, that's what kind of led us to write the book because while we are very present on social media, there's still a whole world out there that's not on social media. And so we wanted to write this book so that we could really continue to broaden our reach and really make more of an impact in people's lives.
Great. I This is the first time I've had an exercise physiologist with a dietitian on the same show. And if you've ever listened to Body Signals before, you know I like to ask the same question of dietitians, but now I've got a dietitian and an exercise physiologist to ask this question to, which is, I know you guys are in Washington, D.C., but if I invited you over for dinner, would I need to like hide all of my junk food? And like I feel like I'd have to do a house cleanse before I had you over because I would fear being judged for some of the things that are in my
Oh
pantry.
no.
Not at all.
No. I mean, as a dietitian, that's part people often think like we're the food police, right? But that couldn't be
Right.
farther from the truth. Like we are trained to not judge people, and to always meet people where they're at. I'm a firm believer of the all foods fit approach. Like there can be a time and a place for different types of foods. Maybe they're not your everyday foods, but there's always room for those more fun foods.
Yeah. Creating restriction never works. So no, you're never gonna see me look at you funny for eating junk food at all. Don't worry about that.
Good. So glad to hear that. Now, you guys have written this book from the perspective of plant based.
Uh-huh.
I married a vegan back in 2016, which, to paraphrase Samuel Jackson in Pulp Fiction, kind of makes me a vegan. I'm curious on a couple things. A, why did you decide to go plant based? And for those in our audience that aren't familiar, maybe just spend a second to describe the difference between vegan and plant based.
Okay. So Diana, you want to go ahead and get started about why
Yeah.
plant-based? Yeah.
Sure. I'll start with why we decided to focus on plant based. I mean, first of all, there's quite a bit of literature. There's a lot of evidence based literature out there that shows a plant based or a plant forward way of eating can really help. Has a really positive health outcome. So, whether you're completely plant based, like veganism, vegetarian, or you're more plant forward, like the DASH diet or Mediterranean diet, there are different diets that many health practitioners recommend. They have been shown to really have great health effects, including with type 2 diabetes. And one thing we noticed too with working with this patient population was that a lot of people were really hesitant to incorporate plant based proteins or plant based meals into their diet because of the higher carbohydrate content, right? So, a plant based protein like a bean, a legume, does have carbohydrates in it. And that community is has been told for years that they need to restrict carbohydrates or they need to limit carbohydrates. So for them, incorporating plant-based meals is also incorporating more carbohydrates. And so we wanted to make this approach, this way of eating, much more approachable for people. And we wanted people to be able to incorporate more of these really health promoting foods in a way that was well balanced, high in fiber, weight and lower on the glycemic index, so that when they ate plant-based meals, they weren't necessarily scared of like the potential blood sugar spikes that they would get from eating more carbohydrates. So we decided to really focus more on plant-based because a lot of people already know how to cook chicken, right? A lot of people know how to cook meat. There's so many recipes online, but people really struggle with cooking plant-based meals and ones that again are balanced, have enough protein in them, and are gonna be high in fiber. So we wanted to make a complete resource for people with our book, where it wasn't just a few recipes here and there that were plant-based, but everything across the spectrum, like Jose said, from breakfast to lunch to dinner to snacks. we wanted to include all of it plant-based, so it was a complete resource for people.
And Bill, I would like to go ahead and tell you a quick story about how I got exposed to this plant based whole food approach. So, right out of school, I had an internship with two doctors that happened to be plant based physicians. They practice lifestyle medicine, which is a real branch of medicine that many doctors are getting board certified in nowadays. And during my time in this practice, we saw about 100 patients a week, and unfortunately 50 to 60% of those patients had some form of metabolic condition, which is high cholesterol, high blood pressure, high blood glucose, fatty liver disease, you name it. And the premise behind this lifestyle medicine is that it teaches doctors how to teach their patients how to follow a more plant-based lifestyle to prevent and reverse those metabolic conditions. So 100 patients a week, whenever somebody would get diagnosed or they would come back for a checkup, the doctors would tell them, hey, there is this approach, it's a plant based whole food diet that works if you want to go ahead and prevent the development of this disease, or if you want to go ahead and even reverse it. So they would go ahead and hand them off a sheet with some instructions. They would tell them, come back in 3 months and let's see what happens. Now, let me tell you, the patients that would follow that approach to the T, they would come back 3 months later and their blood glucose would be back in normal range. Blood cholesterol, normal range. Blood pressure, normal range. They would have to get off medications or greatly reduce their medications as a result of being on this plant based approach. Now, unfortunately, the other group of patients that were given this advice but didn't follow it, they would come back 3 months later and nothing would have changed or things would be worse. They would have to be put on more medications. And then they would go down this downward spiral of prescription medications. And that made me sad because they had a solution right in front of their faces. They could have gone ahead and like taken advantage of that. But I had a light bulb moment that made me realize that they didn't they probably wanted to follow it. I mean, nobody wants to live with prescription medications for the rest of their life. Everybody wants a good quality of life, but maybe they didn't have the support system or the enough information or a plan to follow that approach. So that is the reason why I decided to, expose this plant-based approach in social media and how it can help the reversal of these conditions. And that snowballed to like meeting Diana, like she mentioned, and snowballed to creating this program and now the book. And that is basically why plant-based since the very get-go was a passion for me because I saw it right before my own eyes, how it can truly help people improve their quality of life.
Thanks, Jose. I'm glad you added that. And I actually have some follow-up questions for both of you. What you were saying, Jose, I think is so important. And we actually discussed this with my last guest, which was Dr. Sunil Kolawad. And he's a endocrinologist out of UCSF. And we talked about this topic of physicians trying to treat people that have metabolic disease, metabolic dysfunction. And we were both talking about the challenges that exist today in our medical system where doctors have usually 5 to 6 minutes with a patient, and that's about it. So you find somebody who's pre-diabetic or maybe full-blown type 2 diabetes, and you want to help them reverse it. There's so much you need to talk about, but you don't have the time, which I think is a great argument for, why your program is so valuable. Because someone can go from getting that diagnosis or that warning that they're pre-diabetic and they have to make changes, and rather than just doing Google searches, there's a place you can go to start that healthy change.
Yes, and we actually mentioned that in our book. The statistics show that a typical office visit at a primary care doctor is between 15 and 20 minutes. The first 10 minutes are about your labs, what the results said. The other 5 minutes are about, let's go ahead and put you on some medications. There is no time to talk about lifestyle change, if any at all.
Right. Now, my own personal story for both of you is as I mentioned, I got married and my wife was vegan. I actually reached the highest weight I'd ever been at and the worst fasting glucose right after going vegan because I went junk food vegan. we would go to Veggie Grill, and I was eating the fried cauliflower and the French fries and the vegan shake. I'm thinking, this is healthy. This is vegan. This is
Yeah.
awesome. I'm going to reverse this type 2 diabetes. And
Mhm.
like I said, I reached my highest weight, and my glucose numbers were not good.
Mm.
And one thing, I actually got a pre-release copy, an advanced reading copy of your book. And one thing it's nice to see, I have a bunch of vegan cookbooks on my bookshelf, but I don't have many that are really healthy vegan cookbooks. So it wasn't until I decided to, okay, I'm going to be plant-based or vegan, but I'm also going to be healthy at the same time, that I saw some amazing results.
Wow.
And I'm glad that I see that in your cookbook. One,
Wow. Yeah.
but one thing I want to congratulate both of you on is that I have this pet peeve with cookbooks that have mediocre images of the food. Your the photography, I don't know who did your food photography, but the images in your book with the meals that you guys have created, so good. I mean, I was just salivating just looking through it. And uh, I have a bunch of cookbooks like that I'm trying to get through, but I
Mhm.
jumped to your book to make 2 recipes. So kudos on the photography in the book. And it's actually a very fun book to read.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Bill.
We worked with a professional photographer in Puerto Rico. So my family lives in Puerto Rico, and we actually I was living there at the time we were doing this cookbook. So we decided to do all the photography in Puerto Rico, and we ended up photographing 60 to 70 recipes in 3.5 days. It
Wow.
I
was, yeah.
It
You
was a
know,
lot of fun though. I flew down there, and for the span of 4 days, it was craziness in the kitchen. It was 15 to 20 people running all over the place, somebody prepping, somebody doing food styling. Diana was conducting the orchestra. There was a photographer. It was fantastic.
the question I had in the back of my mind looking through your book and thinking about that photo shoot was, who ate all the food? When you prepare all of those recipes, Jose, you've got your hand
That was
raised.
me.
Yeah.
Jose, my dad,
Quality
my father
control.
ate a bunch of it.
Yeah. Were you able to freeze some of that stuff for later?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
definitely.
Well, I mean, the book is great, and we're going to talk about it. But before we get there, we're also going to talk about Signos. I know you both have experience with Signos, but you're just thinking about, Diana, what you were saying about the balance of carbs and proteins and things like that. When some people get on Signos, when they haven't gone through any of our activities, sometimes the natural inclination for some members is just to go full on keto right off the bat and cut out carbs. In fact, I think I did that at one point in the early days pre-Signos. Just thought, okay, well, if carbs make my glucose go higher, I won't eat carbs. Yeah, you've worked it into your book. So my question for both of you is, why not go full keto in this cookbook? Why did you decide to go with more of the balanced approach of carbs, protein, and fat?
Great question, and I would like to take a stab at that question
Sure.
because I love going on rants about the ketogenic diet on social media. So before I can answer that question, I kind of have to give some background information about what is type 2 diabetes. So type 2 diabetes, even though there's different forms of diabetes, there's type 1, type 1.5, then you have pre-diabetes and type 2 diabetes. Type 1 and type 1.5 are autoimmune forms of diabetes. So they have a different pathophysiology, but the common denominator between all forms of diabetes is high blood glucose. What we focus on is prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and elevations in blood sugar in general, because the common factor behind those conditions is something known as insulin resistance. So, insulin resistance is when your cells become blind to the signals of insulin. And for those of you that don't know, this is diabetes 101. Insulin is a hormone that acts like a key that opens the door of the cell so glucose can go in. Now, if that key is not opening the door of the cell, then if the key is not working, the door never opens, and then glucose never goes in. So it stays circulating your bloodstream. And that is what happens when somebody puts a CGM on or they do a finger prick and they are type 2 diabetic or pre-diabetic. Their blood glucose will be chronically elevated due to that miscommunication between the cell and the insulin. So now you may be asking yourself, well, how does somebody develop insulin resistance? Why are these cells becoming resistant to this key? And what research has shown is that over multiple, what research has shown since the very beginning is that multiple years of eating an excess consumption of calories beyond your normal maintenance caloric level, which is individual for everybody, if you eat an excess calories beyond that level for multiple years, you become resistant to insulin because you start putting weight on places that are not supposed to store big quantities of fat. Now, that is your liver. Your liver is not supposed to store high amounts of fat. Your muscle tissues are not supposed to store large amounts of fat. And it's easier to overconsume calories when you're focusing too much on refined carbohydrates and saturated fats, which is basically what our standard American diet is composed of. So you're eating lots of muffins and bacon and beef patties and white bread and pasta. That leads to an overconsumption of calories very easily. And that is what makes you put the weight on, and that is what leads to insulin resistance. So once you have insulin resistant, you are going to become intolerant to carbohydrates. All types of carbohydrates are going to be quote unquote, they're going to show you that you cannot metabolize them correctly. So here's the thing. Here's where the confusion happens. A banana, which is a all healthy carbohydrate, will spike somebody with insulin resistance the same way that eating a soda, for example. So or drinking a soda. So people are going to equate healthy carbohydrates like bananas to bad for my health. And they're going to put them in the same category as a sugary drink or as a muffin and so on. But nobody in the world has gotten type 2 diabetes from eating bananas, from eating potatoes, from eating whole grains. So it's not correct to blame all carbohydrates. There's two different forms. There's the refined carbohydrates, which are bad, should be avoided in most cases, right? No, no discrimination here for junk food. You can go ahead and have it every now and then. But if the large majority of your diet is composed of refined carbohydrates, you can rest assured that you're constantly going to have spikes. And refined carbohydrates usually come prepackaged with saturated fats and trans fats, which leads to insulin resistance. So, to my point, not all carbohydrates are created equal, but people have demonized all carbohydrates, and that's where the confusion starts. So people are like, okay, well, now I'm insulin resistant. I cannot be eating potatoes. That is not what we teach. What we're telling people to start focusing on is lowering the saturated fat content of their foods, to start lowering the refined carbohydrate consumption and start increasing their whole complex carbohydrate consumption that comes from mostly plant-based sources, which are high on fiber and are good for blood glucose control. Once you make that switch from bad calories to good calories, you start becoming more insulin sensitive. Your body starts metabolizing carbohydrates the correct way again. So to answer your question about the keto diet, most people they take that approach because they are confused about carbohydrate metabolism. If carbohydrates are elevating my blood glucose, hence carbohydrates are bad, so I should be on a ketogenic diet, which is high fat, low carb. Now, what they are not realizing is that a ketogenic diet doesn't truly make you more insulin sensitive. So when somebody goes on a ketogenic diet and they follow it for, let's say, like a month, and they go back to the doctor because everything, they're feeling better, blood glucose is down, A1C is down, and paper things are starting to look better. So the doctor tells them, hey, your type 2 diabetes is reversed. Keep doing what you're doing. Keep doing that keto diet. They go back home. They're like, I reversed my type 2 diabetes. Let me go ahead and eat this banana that I haven't been eating because I'm on a keto diet. But they eat it and their blood sugar skyrockets. So what does that tell you? They're still physiologically insulin resistant. So they are not having a correct management of blood glucose in a glucose challenged state. So what we are trying to tell people is that if you're truly trying to reverse insulin resistance, what it means to reverse it is to have proper blood glucose management in a glucose challenged state. And the way to do it is through increasing your fat intake, antioxidant intake, water intake, and reducing your saturated fat intake. And what is the type of diet that includes all of those parameters? Is a plant-based whole food diet.
I'm gonna gang up on keto here as well, just a bit. And I know there might be some listeners that are in the middle of a keto diet, and I do kind of understand why you've gone that direction. But what I've also noticed when I tried this was that it's not very sustainable. It's
Mm.
just very, very hard, and at times you just feel like you are very low energy because you're not getting that macro into your diet. And there's a proof point too. If you go to Google Scholar and you type in keto and you pull up the studies on the keto diet and then look at the attrition rate in the study, how many people drop out of that particular study studying keto diets, you find that the numbers are really high compared to other diets that have been studied because it just isn't that sustainable. And the cool thing about using a CGM is you can find complex carbs. You can find fruits that are gentle on your glucose than others. So I like some snacks, and like most people, I don't spike on berries. So blackberries, blueberries. So I'll have a handful of those maybe twice a day. I think, A, I'm getting some fiber, so it's great, but it also is kind to my glucose.
Uh-huh.
But I like your point also about a glucose challenge state because I think that's very important, and I've heard that anecdotally from a number of people that coming off the keto, they're just spiking, just crazy spikes
It happens.
because their body's not used to it.
And I think also too, a lot of people are becoming scared of normal blood sugar spikes, right? And it's completely normal to see some sort of a rise in blood sugar after consuming carbohydrates. It's a very normal physiological event that happens in our body. We eat carbohydrates, they're broken down into glucose. Glucose rises in our bloodstream, and that's why we have a pancreas to produce insulin to bring that down. So that normal rise is completely okay. It's when you start going above that normal target range, that's when it becomes more of an issue. And so it's okay if you have experienced a little bit of a rise from carbohydrates. That's normal. So I just want to make that clear too.
I'm glad you said that, Diana, because that's the other reaction we get from people that are monitoring their glucose. They feel like all spikes are bad, and it's not
No.
necessarily true. It's a normal physiological response. Now, you do want to keep your body from spiking constantly throughout the day because it can stress out your pancreas if your pancreas is constantly having to produce insulin. But some moderate spikes throughout the day from healthy sources of food is not a bad thing.
Yeah,
Exactly.
you're right. And what you're going to notice, Bill, and this is something that I noticed by wearing a Signos CGM, is that there's a difference between calling something pronounced a spike and calling something a slow rise in your blood glucose and a slow come down on your blood glucose. So fluctuations on your blood glucose are completely fine, like Diana mentioned. It's supposed to go up, it's supposed to go down. Now, if you were to spike up beyond the normal physiological level and stay high for a long time, then that means that there's some underlying insulin resistance. So you have to keep that in mind. But again, and this is not to blame anybody, but if you go into wearing a CGM with not understanding too much of the nutrition and the physiological responses to carbohydrates, you may just think that all spikes are bad for you.
Exactly. That's
Mm.
exactly the point. Let me get back to your book, The Type 2 Diabetes Revolution, which is going to be available November 7th. I'm not sure if I
Sure.
said that, but you can pre order it, I believe, on Amazon.
Mhm.
Um, the other thing I really loved about this book is that you devote quite a bit of time to meal planning. Now, I'm an aspirational meal planner, and I'm really glad I have you both on today because maybe you can help me actually get into meal planning. I'm very envious of seeing people with their neatly stacked kind of containers of food that they can prepare all at once and have meals for the week. I'm the type of person that for every single meal makes a run to the grocery store to get things to cook. I don't know why
Right.
I have this challenge, but I think there are others like me. So, what do you have to say to individuals who haven't kind of um, gone into this new revolution of meal planning? Because it makes tons of sense. I don't know why I don't do it. Maybe it's
Yeah.
because it
So
requires planning.
I would like to touch on that because I just came up with an analogy to meal planning. Now, First of all, when you jump into any kind of plan, it's it's probably because you have a goal in mind. You want to achieve something, so you have a plan to achieve that goal. In the case of following our meal plan, your goal is to become more insulin sensitive, right? So you have to go ahead and follow a plan to get that result. So it's the same as going to the gym without a workout plan. If you go ahead and show up to the gym one day and maybe do some squats, maybe do some chest press, and you don't actually have a progressive plan to follow that tells you what to do on Wednesdays, what to do on Fridays, what to do on Sundays, how many reps, how many sets, how much are you supposed to rest between sets. If you don't go with that plan to the gym, trust me, you're not going to see results. So the same applies to a meal plan to get results on in your health, to get results in your improvements in blood glucose, improvements in blood cholesterol, losing weight, whatever your goal is, you have to plan for it. So you have to start with that in mind. What am I trying to achieve by following this? Now, just like a newbie to the gym, you cannot just sit down and come up with a plan on your own. It's impossible to go ahead and understand how to create a hypertrophy plan for an individual if you don't have exercise knowledge. So the same applies to the meal plan. That is why you need to rely on somebody that first gives you a meal plan that tells you, hey, this is what you eat for breakfast, this is what you eat for lunch, this is what you eat for dinner. By the way, everything that you're eating throughout the day contains this amount of calories, this amount of protein, this amount of carbs, this amount of fat, this amount of fiber. In our case, we actually give people the amount of fiber and the carbohydrate to fiber ratio, which Diana's probably going to touch on. So we just give them the plan on like how they should do it, why they should do it, and then you go ahead and follow it, and that is how you get results. So, Bill, if you are not a meal planner or if you're scared of meal planning, what you got to do is ask yourself, why am I even doing this in the first place? Write down your why, and then go ahead into the plan with action and with motivation as to what you want to achieve, basically.
Yes, I heard everything you said, Jose.
Great.
And I agree with you. I still I don't know if I'm over the barrier that I'm facing with meal
Yeah.
planning.
I mean, I can continue to touch upon that. I think a
Yes,
lot of
good, because then
people,
I have some challenges
Diana will convince you.
once Diana continues.
yeah. I mean, first of all, the meal plan is there for people who want to do it. I mean, you absolutely don't have to meal
I
plan if it
want
doesn't
to. I want.
Okay. If it doesn't fit with your lifestyle, you don't have to plan if things are working well with your current approach. But a few barriers that we've come across when it comes to meal planning is number one, how much time is spent in the kitchen. So, you have to, or you have to dedicate like a few hours on the weekend to meal prep. It does involve some preparation, of course, and some cooking. And another, I think, a big reason why people don't like to meal prep is because of concerns about wasting food. I think that's a big one, and the monotony of eating the same foods throughout the week. So, if I don't know if any of those are some barriers for you when it comes to meal planning, but I can touch upon those and how we address them in our book. But so let's start with reducing time in the kitchen. So with our meal plan, we have a section that tells you how to prepare a few of the recipes ahead of time. So whether that's blending up a dressing, chopping an onion, we pick a few different things that'll make your life so much easier for the week without having to make you feel overwhelmed in that few hours that you need to spend meal prepping. So we address that, and then concerns about wasting food I think is a huge one, especially for people who are trying to who are living on a budget, right? The last thing you want to do is waste food. So we address that by incorporating all of the snacks and desserts, like especially snacks. We make the snacks from leftover ingredients for that week. So, for example, if you have to buy carrots to make for a specific recipe that week, then you can rest assured you're going to use that whole bag of carrots in your snacks for that week. So we really try to make that a priority in our meal planning, our meal plan, really reducing food waste as much as possible. And then we address the monotony of the food by having different meals. So I think having more than one meal three or more times is a little too much. So we instead don't go more than twice in a week. So basically, your dinner is usually going to serve for lunch the next day, and then you'll move on to the next meal. So you're not super bored with the same meal every day. Do those address any of your concerns?
They they do. And
Okay.
to both of you, I'll turn the tables and argue for meal planning that being on a journey where you're trying to improve your wellness, you're trying to perhaps lose weight, having your meals already prepared really circumvents, I think, one of the biggest issues. And that is, when you are just pressed for time and need something to
Mhm.
eat, you can tend towards something which may not be conducive to whatever journey you're on.
Mm.
That was me using a lot of words to not say good or bad foods. So
Yeah.
I've
Yeah.
been trained not to do that. So I intellectually I buy into this concept. I guess for me there's a situational aspect that's a challenge, which is my wife and I don't always like the same foods,
Mm.
and I'm not sure that I can find a way to plan for both of us and still accommodate both of our tastes in foods. She might not feel like chili one specific day. That's one of the recipes I cooked out of your book. I loved it. The three bean
Thank you.
chili
Oh,
recipe.
yay.
Yay.
So glad you loved
Um,
it.
so that, I mean, that is the situational challenge of like trying to plan for two. Her and I've actually thought, well, maybe we should prepare two different sets of meals, but then it seems kind of time prohibitive.
There's going to be some time investment for sure when it comes to meal prepping. But one thing that I try to do personally here at home with my girlfriend is set a time on Sundays, most of the time from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., where we make meal prep fun. So we put some music, we make some mocktails at the same time that we're cooking, we are doing the laundry. So everything is happening at the same time, but it's like 2 hours of like productivity where I mean, in your case, Bill, maybe you can cook some of the meals that you like the most. Your wife cooks the meals that she likes the most. You meal prep them together. You make that experience fun, and that takes care of that issue.
Yeah, that's it. I think
Could
you've
be.
hit on it, Jose. It's making it fun, and I was also kind of curious as to what the time commitment was. So you're saying within 2 hours you can usually
Yeah,
do the prep for
two
a
hours
week.
of meal prepping, 1 hour of like going shopping. Then you probably are set for the next 3 to 4 days like that.
Great. And Diana, do you have like a similar meal prep time?
Yeah, I mean, I've gotten to the point now where I just will batch cook a few different things. So when it comes to the weekend, I'll think about a grain that I want to include for that week. I'll think about a few different vegetables, a few different plant-based proteins. And so I'll make a big thing, a big batch of, for example, rice for that week, brown rice. I'll think about the different proteins. So I'll think, okay, I want some tofu. So I might just stick that into the air fryer using kitchen tools that can help just take away your time spent cooking is huge. I couldn't recommend that more. So I rely heavily on my air fryer and on my instant pot, and I use that
For
for a
a lot
lot
of
of my cooking. And then I usually think of like one dressing that I'll use for that week. I'll blend that up, keep that in the kitchen. I can always just throw that on top of my meals, give them some taste. And then, yeah, the different veggies, I'll have some raw, some cooked that I saute. And then I kind of mix and match. That's how I kind of do my meal prepping. Instead of focusing on specific recipes, I make a large batches of a few different things and then mix and match throughout the week.
So Diana, very fluid, and Jose, very regimented. Both, I think, both approaches work for different types of people. I think I'm going to
yeah.
have to go with Jose on this one because I think I
Okay.
need to set aside that time. Being somebody who's meal planning averse at this point, I'm going to need to like hold myself accountable. But I love the idea of making it fun, putting some music on,
Yeah.
multitasking, getting something else that needs to be done in that same time frame. I think
Do
are
it this
great
Sunday and let me
ideas.
know how it goes.
Yeah, I will. I will let you know. I'm going to call you up, Jose, and let
All
you know
right.
how it went. I want to talk about protein because
Okay.
for me, that's been a big challenge in going plant based and also doing adding a lot of resistance training to my exercise regimen. Is I want to make sure I get enough protein. One question is it seems like everywhere I go, trusted source and not trusted source, I get different recommendations as to how many grams of protein I should be getting per day. So I'd love to get your input there. But then also just get from you some ideas as to how you can sneak more protein into the plant-based meals in the book that you guys create.
Yeah. So for our meal plans, we kind of follow the dietary guidelines, which is 10 to 35% of your calories should come from protein. So we stick with that range. Although 10% is definitely on the lower side, we are generally pretty well above that. But so for our meal plans, you can definitely know that you're getting the recommended amount of protein. And to increase your protein intake, I would say, really focusing, of course, on legumes. So legumes are going to be beans, things like lentils, chickpeas, black beans. If there's a meal that where you can increase the amount of legumes in it, then I think that's a great way to add some more protein. Tofu and tempeh are going to be really great protein sources as well. So adding those to your meals, even if you are having more of a legume-based meal, you can always add those as to increase the protein content easily. We're a big fan of edamame. So edamame are young soybeans and are very high in protein, and those can not only be added to meals, but you can enjoy those easily as a snack. We have a recipe actually in our book for edamame as a snack, and you can really just you can grab edamame, put a little water in the bowl, frozen edamame, and just throw it into the microwave for a few minutes, and there you go. You have a very easy snack, high protein rich snack. Some other ways include, nuts and seeds are also going to be great ways to increase the protein in your meal. So whether that's adding, nut butters to proteins or to smoothies, oatmeal, or having it as a dip with like fruit and vegetables. So another easy way to incorporate some more protein. Seeds. I love adding seeds to everything. Chia seeds, hemp seeds, flax seeds, pumpkin seeds, they're all going to have some protein, and you can easily add them to anything, really. You can add them to yogurt, to oatmeal, to even salads. So it's a sneaky way to get a few more grams of protein. And then lastly, one just very easy, convenient way is protein powder, right? Like there's so many plant-based protein powders available in the market, and you can get really specific where it has one ingredient. So I've seen like hemp seed protein powder, I've seen sunflower seed protein powder, or you can have ones that have a little more taste to them. So like a chocolate protein powder that you can add to your oatmeal, for example, or even to baking recipes.
No.
So I think protein powder is a very easy, convenient way to up your protein intake, but I think there's a lot of different ways to do it in general.
Yeah,
Just to add,
oh, go ahead, Jose.
sorry, just to add to what Diana was saying about protein, one of the main questions that we get from people is how am I going to get my protein on a plant based diet? It's like the biggest misconception out there. Now, I can tell you that I can reach 180 grams of protein eating plant based in one day without even thinking about it. And what I tell people to do is to, if you don't believe me, go to an app like Chronometer or MyFitnessPal, and on a day that you have chosen to eat fully plant based, just input everything that you have eaten on that day, and let the software tell you how much protein that contains, and you will be surprised to see how much protein plant based sources contain.
Or just log your food in Signos if you're using Signos, because we
Or
also
log in your
provide
food
the
and
yeah
signals
we
if you,
provide the
yeah, if you're
macro.
using signals. Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm getting better at it, and I actually added some things to your recipes on the chili. I added TVP. I'm kind of
Oh,
curious if you guys consider that processed. Is it still okay? It seems like it's somewhat processed, and that's textured vegetable protein, which is almost all protein.
Yeah.
Um,
Technically,
yeah.
I mean, technically it is, but it's a plant-based source of protein. And as a matter of fact, I had it this week. Where did my girlfriend put it? She put it on zucchini lasagna that she made.
Mm.
and it was delicious. It was
Yeah.
delicious. It does have the texture of minced beef. It
Right.
kind of looks like that, and then you can go ahead and put any flavorings that you want, any spices, and make
Which
it
works great.
crackling.
It works great in a chili.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And then I did your Tuscan kale, lemon kale, white
Mm.
bean soup,
That
which is
one
actually
is
right next to the chili recipe. I did it twice. The first time was absolutely delicious, but then I had this brainstorm. I was in the grocery store and saw Impossible makes an Italian sausage, so I chopped up some
Oh, yeah.
Italian
okay.
sausage, put it maybe even more processed than the TVP. So maybe not something I do all the time, but it was absolutely delicious both times with it, without the
Oh,
sausage, but
good.
with.
Glad to
Yeah.
hear.
So as you can tell, everyone listening, I really love this book. So
Thank you, Bill. I
sorry you
appreciate
guys have to wait till November 7th. Uh, I'm curious. I want to end the show. I know you both have used Signos, and one thing I love to ask people that have been on Signos, I'd love to know what your biggest aha was when you put on your CGM and looked at your
I can go
Signos app.
first
Okay,
because
Diana,
I
go
because
ahead.
I know it. So I have a 9-month-old baby, and sleep is something that is not as common anymore. And so I think for me, one of the biggest aha moments was how much sleep really impacts blood sugar. Um, I could just tell immediately a difference in when I had a poor night's sleep, which is quite often nowadays, versus before when, I was sleeping more regularly. I had a really healthy sleep schedule. And so that was a huge aha moment. I mean, I've read it in the literature. I know poor sleep can really affect blood sugar, but actually seeing it in real life was really, really surprising.
That's a great one. Before you go, Jose, you actually gave me a great idea for or reason for why meal planning can be so valuable. Is if you do have several foods planned out for the week, you can do experiments. And Diana, one of the experiments I love to do is I eat the exact same breakfast every single morning, an oatmeal that has the exact same ingredients weighed out to like the tenth of a gram. And when I have a poor night's sleep, I have a completely different glycemic response to that exact same breakfast than when I've had a great night's sleep. With meal planning, if you're making some of the chia puddings that are in the book, or you're having like an avocado toast or something several days during that week, you can do the same experiment if you experience a bad night's sleep versus a good night's sleep eating the same thing. So that's another reason to meal plan is you've got some consistency of foods to measure something like sleep and glycemic response against.
That's a great idea.
Jose, we've given you enough time. What you?
For me, it was cool to see um, that in real time that Cygnus was confirming what I already knew about my blood glucose responses. So I would do small experiments and I would broadcast them on Instagram and social media because I was wearing a Cygnus CGM at the time. So before I would go on a bike ride, I would go ahead and take a screenshot of my blood glucose level. Let's say it was about 90, 95, and I'll tell people, guess what's going to happen to my blood glucose by going on a bike ride for 45 minutes at low intensity? Is it going to go up or down? And I would put a poll on Instagram. A lot of people kind of like already knew. A lot of people were confused. A lot of people know it's probably going to go up. And lo and behold, 45 minutes went by of me doing low intensity cardiovascular training. And then, boom, my blood glucose would dip to the 70s. So it was just confirming what I knew that would happen to my blood glucose with exercise. But it was super cool to see, wow, this is going on inside of my body right now. Like this is something that like I learn about it and I know that this is going to happen, but now it's happening inside of me and I can see it in real time. So that was very cool. The same would happen when I would eat, and I generally recommend people to go on a 15-minute walk after they eat, because there's a lot of research showing that walking after meals improves your blood glucose control. So I would go ahead and take a screenshot. 5 minutes after I'm eating, I can see my blood glucose going up. And then I would go on a walk, and lo and behold, like 10 minutes later, my blood glucose would start coming down. And I would tell people, hey, like if I was to compare a day that I don't walk after a meal and a day that I do walk, you could see a pretty good difference on your blood glucose response post meal. So Cygnus was just confirming what I knew would happen, but it was cool to see.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah,
so glad you mentioned that, Jose, because that's been a fascination of mine as of late, especially looking at my Signos graphs during different types of exercise. So for me, it's doing rowing, it's doing weightlifting, or hiking. And you can actually see that glucose, like you said, I start out about 95. You can see it dip, and I usually work out fasted. So I know there's nothing that's going to cause the increase other than gluconeogenesis, with my liver dumping some glycogen stores in the form of glucose back in my bloodstream to fuel my workout. You can actually see your glucose rising back up.
uh
And so you know what's happening. And for my longer hikes, then I actually also start to then see it drop when I exhaust my liver stores of glycogen, and I know I've got to eat something like a banana or something to get some of that glucose back to end the
yeah.
hike. So you absolutely agree.
It's
So
super
fascinating.
important to know that a lot of professional triathletes nowadays, Bill, they are wearing a CGM just to see what's their blood glucose response at all times through the length of a 10-hour race.
Maybe that was my problem. And that race, when I they closed it out,
Yeah,
I
Maybe
didn't
way more
fuel
carbohydrate energy.
properly. Yeah.
Yeah, that could have happened.
That's awesome. Well, I loved having you guys on, and I think I came up with a way to keep myself accountable. I would love to have you both back after I've done a few months
I
of your
like
meal plan, just to recap and maybe come up with some other ideas about how we can all reverse prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, or maybe just maintain metabolic wellness. So thank you both for being on Body Signals.
I would love that. Thank you for having us, Bill.
yeah. Thank you so much for having us.
Don't forget to subscribe, like this video, and tap the bell icon to be the first to get more videos like this one, and stay connected with Signos.